The first section is...
So Bartek originally started with the idea of how humans could interact in, say, like 100 years' time, when the world is ending, resources are short, everyone is kind of independent, and they have to rely on themselves for their own survival, and how that would change us as humans, and whether we'd actually end up relying on our own animal instincts.
And really exploring, almost like
so at the beginning I came up with this idea of kind of futuristic world when our animal instincts take over, and actually it's like backward evolution. So it's like a trigger that suddenly releases all of our animal instincts, and we are not able to control ourselves anymore.
Bartek gave us this task where we had to improvise, but with two different qualities in our minds, which was human instinct and animalistic sort of vibe. So we had to contrast both of them at the same time, and it was quite interesting because it kept your mind quite active while you did it. And I liked it a lot because it brought a kind of desperate quality to it as well.
Bartek gave us, he shouted out animals, that we, not to be the animal, but be the qualities of the animals. And it was like this constant war between human and animal instincts.
I really wanted to challenge them to move differently to what they usually do, and it's not even about challenging, jumps, challenging positions. It was more about changing the whole posture of and the way they move.
He wanted to almost create a new human race with own behaviour, own movements, own posture, which is something completely new, which might exist in the future.
Today was really interesting for me because we had some tasks that made us switch off our brain at some point and go with our physical instincts, maybe. And that was what the piece is about as well. That Bartek wants to concentrate on human beings losing being rational and just going with what their instincts tell them to do.
The inspiration for today's task came from an animation that Bartek came across, and there was all different shapes and forms and dynamics. And yeah, Bartek basically wanted something that wasn't human, wasn't from a human, was from this animated kind of robotic fake kind of thing.
7, 8.
When Bartek introduced the piece, with the fact that it was going to be this contact work in it, but he didn't want to just do any particular contact work. He wanted to create almost like a vocabulary of movement, which would be like repeated in some of the phrases, and we kept revisiting like the same lift to go back to that like vocabulary idea.
first few rehearsals we made a few kind of phrases and lifts and movements, and we sort of looked at the qualities of those movements and sort of assigned elements to them to give them to give them a deeper feeling. So we sort of took on the character of that animal and added it to the movement to make it even more of that animal.
I taught them quite a few phrases in which I wanted them to kind of get the idea what kind of qualities I expect, what kind of movement I'm going to put in the piece. So we didn't really use much of them in the actual piece, but for me it was more like I was trying to be this virus that will infect them with these qualities, with this style.
Bartek in this piece, I felt like really took a step out of the box, and he challenged himself in a different way to what he usually does. I feel like Bartek often just works to learn, but this time I think he took 3 steps out and found some people to collaborate with. And I thought the 2 people he collaborated with was an interesting choice.
I think something in particular is the music, because he's made such an effort with the composer. The composer's music is fantastic. It's very specific. And it's not necessarily 8s but the beats in it. And there's certain sections where Bartek has told us where we have to be human, morphing into animal, back to human, morphing into animal. Do you know what I mean? And you can hear it in the music, but this needs to be, I need to confirm this with myself.
We also have a collaboration with an artist. He drew quite a specific drawing of the idea of humans in a different, humans in the same environment but with a different hierarchy. So the specifics of that drawing really helped us to get an idea of what the relationship between the dancers in the piece are. And it didn't change what we thought of the piece much, because I already sort of knew quite well what the piece was about, but it just made the idea more clear. And I have a duet with the other dancer, Ed, and we subconsciously put that image into our duet, so that was quite interesting as
well. It was really nice to actually work with Bartek, the initial work anyway, was really nice. So he basically started with giving me the general feeling of the piece and obviously what it's about, which is obviously the brief for the lighting designer. But it was also really good to get a visual stimulus from Bartek. He gave me some artwork which was really good to look at, just to give you a different perspective. Normally a lot of choreographers will give you the vision, give you what they wish to see, where it was nice to say, this is where I've started in terms of the choreography. So it's great to be like, okay, this can be my starting point with the lights, for the feel, for the genre, for the general atmosphere of the piece. It was great to start with that mysterious kind of feel. I suggested the gobo effect, which is kind of like the breakup of a light with a kind of focused light, so it would give you kind of patterns on your body as they travel through. And so this kind of fitted in with the visual stimulus that he gave me, kind of not wanting to give too much away to the audience as well. So it's kind of something to kind of have the full light, but to have a breakup of the light so it's not fully there. So then that was to then help him create this atmosphere that he wants to do with the movement.
When Bartek wanted to structure the piece, he had a clear intention about what he wanted to say with the movement.
For example, when we had the idea of leadership and who is a leader and how does the leader change and why someone is a leader and somebody else is not. Yeah, we just had an improvisation session, or sometimes we were just trying to sit and think, basically, how can we show that. And another way of structuring was blind choreography.
So I want two people to walk towards Alice, and the rest who is in the same position, so who don't walk, I want you to drop something, whatever it means to you. And then two people who are with Alice, I want you to lift her somehow and walk towards the rest of other people who just dropped something.
Bartek placed a chair in the centre of the room facing away from us, and he read out of like some instructions and some gave us some decisions and choices that we could make with some of his instructions. So he kind of led us through with one person starting in the corner, everyone else starting over here, and we had a choice to kind of develop a unison section. And so everyone was moving together, and this happened like throughout the piece, and then over time, this piece of these instructions would develop, and the piece would develop. Then Bartek turned round and watched the piece that he'd created blindly, and saw this masterpiece that had been created. That he had just said a few things. What something he wanted to do himself, like more of his taste as opposed to ours. Edited some stuff, made sure it was kind of more him, and then we filmed it, and then that was the end of the first part of the rehearsal. And then we moved on to the second part of the rehearsal, which was starting now.
For me, the communication in dance is happening in various ways. The first communication we have, at least in my creative process, is between choreographer and dancers. So during our rehearsals, in our creative process, we are trying to have almost like an argument sometimes, but in a good way. So I kind of try to challenge dancers, and I kind of try to ask them questions, then I get answers, and then I'm like, yeah, but what happens if that? And then I'm like, well, yeah, but what happens if that? And then I ask why, and then they ask why. So it's like it's a really nice tension between us. It's not negative at all. It's very positive, and I really enjoy this kind of challenge I have, because I'm not working with objects, I'm working with people, so obviously they will have sometimes different opinions than I have. So it's really nice that we are trying we're aiming for the same thing.
Imagine that there is a person sitting here, and you want to kill this person who is going to be the last person in the first row. I mean it now. In the performance, you actually are going to look at this person.
Towards the end of the rehearsals, we started to involve the audience quite a bit. And we found sections in the piece where we actually, for example, one bit we had to squat at a certain audience member and make them feel quite intimidated and quite scared.
Nice.
Later on, when the piece is being performed on stage, I think the communication changes, and there is still a communication between a choreographer and dancers, but as a choreographer, I'm not taking part in it. We are almost in the same team now, so we, as a group of people who created the piece, we want to say something to the audience. And it's not about, it's not about teaching them, it's not about telling them what is wrong, what is right. It's more about saying, look, this is our point of view, what do you think about that? Or look, this is how we understand it, what do you think? I think we kind of lost control of what we are actually doing. At the beginning we had this really clear idea about what it's going to be about, but I think we kind of lost it. And I think it's because too many things influenced the piece. You know, there was my idea, but translated into dancer's body, of course, so it was already different. Then there was a painter, then there was a composer who, they really changed the piece.
So I feel like the original idea was this idea about this human race kind of reverting back to animal instincts. As I think now, maybe that's kind of like some kind of like a metaphor or some kind of thing that is actually related to the present day. And that's this idea that actually, even now, as rational and as like advanced thinking we think we are, we still have this innate kind of thing going back to this animalistic the way of being.
Now, I particularly enjoyed that I could discover a lot for myself when we rehearsed for the piece, and Bartek wanted us to react quite instinctively and from inside and spontaneously as well. And I remember one time when he made us improvise and we had our eyes closed, and that's a really simple thing, but it gave me a completely different feeling for the movement, and I very much enjoyed that. And I watched some recordings of it, and it looks different to what I usually look like, so that was a nice discovery in the whole process.
Personally, before we started the piece, especially when I danced and improvised, I thought I had a certain animalistic quality to my dancing, but without actually thinking of being an animal. But I thought that was, now actually thinking of trying to take on the characteristics of an animal or different animals, I found different levels that I didn't know I had. I thought I was already at the limit, and I've sort of gone beyond that without even knowing it.
Now we're nearing the end of this creative process. It's really daunting to perform it because it's been going on quite a while, and we've done a lot of development tasks that haven't necessarily been used in the choreography. It's now kind of crunch time. We need to get on, we need to clean the choreography, we need to make sure that the group sections are really tight. I think because, especially in this work, it's important that we are all embodying the same characteristics and traits. We are animalistic, so we're the same species. We need to decide on how we behave, how we stand when we're not dancing. I think that needs to be cleared up. I also need to work out exactly what I'm doing.
We are towards the end of the creative process and towards the end of actually rehearsals before the show, and I think I'm really excited to see what it's going to be, because you know always the stage gives this sense of freshness. It gives slightly different view on the piece, and I really look forward to seeing it with, you know, actual costumes and lights and all of those things working together.
So try imagine that your right arm pulls you down, and don't be aesthetic. So don't think about being nice.
The whole creation process was actually really interesting this time because I've worked quite a lot with Bartek in quite a lot of his pieces. But he brought new ways of creating movement and new ideas that I feel like he's never brought to the group before. So yeah, that was really interesting, and it was a change as well, so it never got boring. It was a completely different experience.
I think that we're in a very good place for rehearsals now. Throughout each rehearsal, I've been learning more and more about the piece. And I find that it really keeps me active and motivated, because I just keep knowing more and more about the piece. So that's really good, and I feel quite comfortable with the material. Actually, it suits me quite well because I work very well with imagery and ideas, and when there's always a thought or voice behind each movement, so I find that really helpful with me doing the piece, and I hope that the audience can hear those voices and look at those concepts and figure them out while they watch the piece as well.
This profile because I've got spot here.
Oh!
No, just
Because you're not interested.
why?
Else is never interested.
Why?
Because I'm not.
What is interesting for you then?
Nothing is interesting.
I think it was really. I think. Well,
The sexy secretary.
You look like a sheep. It's like,
it's more like, don't touch me.
like a bad smell. So no, not like you are a bad smell, but like,
No, just be honest.
you're not a bad smell.
Jack, stop eating. She's struggling.
Oh! Oh, nice lift.
Oh, from the top.
No paparazzi.
And Selina became a pig at the end.